Hey, what's going on, folks? So I posted something on Facebook the other day, and basically what it said was positive reinforcement can be used to teach anything. Positive reinforcement can be used to stop nothing. Okay? And last time I looked, that that phrase right there was shared over 150 times, and it was like over 1,000 comments or likes or dislikes on it, or whatever. In a nutshell, it created a lot of conversation, a lot of discussion, and that's good because we're at a place where that's probably where we need to be. Most people agreed with that statement very much, like 100%. Some people disagreed with it completely, and not just from the purely positive community, but from the so-called balanced community also. And I have to say, that's a very general, broad statement, and I don't agree with my own statement 100%. Okay? There's a lot more to it than that. Speaking in general terms, how most trainers see things and train, that is a true statement for most people. But I don't agree with my own statement completely. So let me go into a little further discussion about it, and hopefully this will generate more discussion, more anger, more agreement, whatever. But the fact of the matter is, it's always good to debate and question things. Anyone who's worked with me or knows how I train, I actually use very little punishment in dog training. Very little. I just don't use a lot of punishment in dog training. Not because I'm against it, but because I don't have to very often. And to go even further, when someone sends me a dog with a specific issue, and I'll give you plenty of examples here, okay? Let's say someone comes to me with their dog, resource guards, or is reactive or aggressive towards other dogs. I can tell you that I almost never use punishment for the issue problem. The problem the dog has, the problem the dog was sent here, almost never gets punished for those behaviors. Okay, what do I mean by that? And I'll use different scenarios, maybe dogs that you've seen in videos. I'll narrow it down, right? So you guys can go back and look. Let's talk one of my oldest videos, Keezy, the pit bull mix, right? It was human aggressive. The video you see, he's in a muzzle, he's coming at me, this and that. Make a long story short. That dog was failed by many people before, and he was supposed to be put down. And what I told those people, that was the first client I ever told. I'm not sure if I could do it, but I'll give you everything I got. Okay, what you saw there was 3 private lessons. That's what we did to completely turn that dog around, get him out of the muzzle, friendly around all people. Okay, not just me, around all people. He was completely changed from that. I literally never punished the aggression towards me, except for the fact I would stop him with the slip collar when he tried to get me in the beginning of the video. That was the extent of the punishment there, right? You could look at that either ways. Is it punishment? Is it not? It doesn't matter. I don't get into, my hand looks giant in the camera, sorry. I don't get into semantics and, definitions and, that kind of going back and forth. It's just silly and it gets nothing done. And clients don't give a damn about that, okay? So in that video with that dog, there was an e-collar used. There was no food used because he couldn't take food. We couldn't touch the dog, all this, right? So right away when you see an e-collar being used on a dog like that, you assume that the punishment is being corrected with the e-collar. Not one time. And I go into great detail in my book and on some of the YouTube videos and on Facebook where I break down exactly how the e-collar was used with that dog. Exactly. Not one time was the aggression or that dog ever corrected with an e-collar. Not one time. There was a lot of negative reinforcement used there. And what people have to understand, guys, and this is just my opinion, when you use negative reinforcement properly, it allows the dog to learn how to accept a correction much easily and then you have to use punishment much less infrequently, and usually you get to be a lot lighter handed with these dogs also. Okay, so it is important to use, I can't believe I'm even say this, I don't talk about quadrants and stuff, but it really truly is important that you utilize everything when it comes to dog training, right? Everything. To me, I've talked about the fifth quadrant before, which is the most important quadrant. Yes, I said the fifth quadrant to me, and that's owner education and living with your dog. That's the most important part to me, no matter what case we're talking about, right? So let's go back to that dog. Now, one time was that dog ever punished for anything. The most extent of the extent of corrections or punishment was in the beginning when you see that dog try to get to me, I'm pulling up on the slip lead to prevent him from getting to me, even though he had a muzzle on, right? I don't want to give him the opportunity to get to me, even though he has a muzzle on. That's what we're trying to teach the dog, okay? Some will say that's negative reinforcement because I apply leash pressure, and when the dog stops, pressure goes away. Some will say that's punishment because I applied something that stopped the dog from moving forward. Does it really matter? It doesn't. You're going to have people argue both sides there. That's okay. All right. Let's look at Duke and Herc, the two pit bull mixes that were killing each other inside the home. I did a board and train with one of them. Gave people the instructions for the other, right? These are two powerful dogs that literally came to me with staples in their neck. They were killing each other. The fights were really bad. That was 6 years ago, I believe. And those dogs still live together happily without incident. Play together, roughhouse together, are off leash, outside in public, sleep on the same bed, go in the same crate, have never had another incident. Not one time did I ever punish any aggression in those dogs. Not a single time. Never. I'll go a little further into that. This may drag on long, and I'm sorry for that, but people asked a lot of questions after I did the video, the live on DogSpot the other day about resource guarding. It drummed up a ton of questions about marking and rewarding unwanted mindset and behaviors. We'll get to that in a minute. So Duke and Herc, as serious as it gets with each other, right? A nightmare for the owners. I never once punished any aggression in those dogs. Not one time, okay? I did a board and train with one. I did some private lessons with the other. When we put those dogs together, we started off, me and the family went on a long walk in my neighborhood with both dogs. We got to a big open field and we released both dogs off leash to go out, run around free off leash and watch their interaction there. If something would have happened there, a behavior or a demeanor that I didn't like, at that time, I could have corrected that on the spot, but I never had to, okay? So these dogs were trained through the whole thing without ever seeing punishment for the behaviors they came here for. But this is also important to understand. I never put the dog in that situation until it was ready. Meaning that when a dog comes here, if it's dog aggressive, I don't start training around dogs, wait for the dog to exhibit the behavior and then punish that. You're never going to have success like that. Never, never, never. I know a lot of people do that. They jump on the e-collar, they jump on the prong collar. That's not dog training and you're not going to have success. And I'm talking to you from experience here, okay? So people ask, why were you able to get to this point with this dog? Why did you get to this point? Well, I'm telling you, okay? I don't put the dog in that situation. I develop that relationship. I do all the training basically the same unless I have to change for a reason. Once the dog trusts me, believes in me, and we have a strong foundation, then I can slowly start introducing the dog into the situations that they're struggling with. Because by that time, what happens is either the unwanted behavior is completely gone or it becomes very mild. And then when you do have to stop it, the corrections that have to be used are very mild. You don't have to go crazy. All the time this happens, right? So back to that statement. Positive reinforcement can be used to teach anything. We do teach everything with positive reinforcement, but there's times we add a little negative reinforcement in there too, okay? So, for example, what do I mean? Because not everyone understands what negative reinforcement is. And I use a lot of negative reinforcement. People hear the word negative, they think it's something bad. Well, it's not. It's just removing something. Usually in dog training, we're removing pressure. All right? Example. And I have videos covering all this stuff. Let's say we're working on the recall with the dog. We have it on a 15-foot long line, right? And we apply a little bit of light pressure to the dog, and we say, Rex, come. And then the second the dog turns to come our way, that leash pressure goes away. And then we usually mark it and reward it. That leash pressure going away because the dog is responding to the command, that's negative reinforcement. We're just removing that leash pressure. That's what that means, okay? Negative reinforcement paired with positive reinforcement is extremely powerful, extremely beneficial, and does wonders with dogs. We've talked about that a lot. We won't go too far into that. But this here is the area that gets a little controversial, where people argue and won't agree with or think it's stupid, okay? And this goes against that statement. That's what I'm trying to get to. I very often use a clicker to mark and reward unwanted behaviors. Goes against everything that you're supposed to do, right? I very often use a clicker and mark unwanted mindsets in the dog. I mark and reward that. Things that we don't want. Again, goes against everything that's supposed to be done, right? And I'll give you some examples. And I've done this in front of people at workshops, at seminars, and so everyone always questions it, and when they see the impact it has on a lot of these dogs, they're like, okay, incredible. Let's talk about the first dog. I've talked about this dog before. Lady insists on driving down from northern New England with her German Shepherd that doesn't stop barking, okay? Calls, it's been to other trainers. This dog has been lit up. Prong collars, e-collars, they have punished the hell out of this dog to get it to stop barking. No success whatsoever. And the woman has paid a fortune. A fortune. Thousands of dollars to get this stop. Nothing. She wants to drive down here, which is like, I don't know, 18, 20-hour drive, 24-hour drive. I don't know what it is. It's far. For a private lesson to get the dog to stop barking. I tell her no many times. There's no way I can have you drive this far to do this, But she insists. It's worth it to her if we could fix it. She said, can you fix it? I was like, yeah. She's like, are you going to use an e-collar to fix it? I said, no. Okay. Correcting most behaviors with an e-collar is rarely successful for most people because of the way it's done. All right. So I agree to let this lady drive down here. And she's right. This dog doesn't stop barking. Instead of trying to punish the dog, putting something on its neck and hammering the dog, this has been done multiple times. We start charging the dog to the clicker. The dog wasn't charged to the clicker before. She used verbal markers, if I remember correctly, and the other trainers did. So we start, freaky bug. We start charging the dog to the clicker immediately. Doesn't take long, a few minutes. I would have loved to have done it for 10 days before, but we didn't. The dog starts getting the hint. Click, feed, click, feed, click, feed, click, feed. The dog starts getting it, right? Then what happens when we stop, the dog starts barking. When the dog starts barking, we don't punish it. We don't tell it no. We don't do anything. We click, we reward. Dog barks, we click, we reward. You see the confusion come over the dog's face immediately. Makes no sense, right? The dog barks, we click. Now we're clicking and rewarding the behavior that we want stopped. Makes no sense. All right? To make a long story short, after we get enough repetitions in here, the dog starts tuning in a little bit. And then once we get a good routine, a good pattern going, we start adding the verbal command to it. Before the dog barks, bark, guard, whatever you use. When the dog gives it to you, we're marking and rewarding. Again, to make a long story short, 30 minutes, the dog is waiting for the command and he's no longer barking. That's it. That quick, we were able to stop that. Instead of trying to punish the dog for barking, the thing we wanted to stop, we taught the dog to bark on cue. And when you teach something, it's easier to stop it. That's why we always try to teach opposites, okay? that was one case. But we do that all the time. We could do that with jumping. We could do that with a lot of behaviors. Not always necessary, but we can, and we do. Let's talk about, I think it was Benji maybe. A couple years ago, small mixed breed dog, bite history. Has a good bite history, human aggressive, and guards his resources very strongly. Toys, food, anything. He will nail you. He's going to resource guard. So I get that dog here. We go about our normal business. Couple of days, few days, just hanging out, building a little bit of trust and a relationship. The dog needs me to go out, go to the bathroom. He needs me to eat. He needs me to drink. So they start believing in you a little bit, okay? If I'm not mistaken, I'd have to go back and watch the video. Videos are on YouTube. I think within the first week, if I'm remembering correctly, and I could be wrong, maybe it was the second week, but I think it was the first week. But within a very short period of time, we took the thing that the dog was guilty of, biting and guarding his toys and food, and we turned it into a positive. We got that dog tugging and biting very quickly, and he loved it. His obedience went through the roof once we started playing tug and allowing him to bite a sleeve and a tug and toys. He learned to out without punishment very quickly. He loved to play the game. He loved to do obedience while we're playing with a tug. We implemented the things that the dog was here for, biting and guarding toys and food. Within the first week, we were doing all of that stuff. He never once growled or tried to nail me for outings. And the videos, I'm just trying to use dogs that you guys can go back and look at the videos, okay? For the most part. The German Shepherd we didn't have on video, I don't think. But, so when you hear people say it's a stupid idea, if you have a dog with a bite history, to teach him how to bite, well, maybe it's a stupid idea for them. Maybe they can't do it or have never tried it. But play, thank you, Mr. Balabanoff, for being the #1 promoter of playing with your dog on the planet, is extremely powerful. Animals play, especially dogs, and it's an extremely powerful tool when used properly in training. We took what the dog was guilty of, and we taught him how to do it better without any conflict, without any problems. He bit, and he released on cue. He grabbed his toys and released on cue, and we made it a game. That dog was never punished for any of that, okay? If I remember correctly, that dog was corrected 2 times while he was here. One time when he first got here for excessive barking in his pen, and if I remember, I think I threw a Nerf football at his pen, told him knock it off. At his pen, not at him. He was in his pen, a Nerf football. And that little distraction, something coming from away, that's all he needed. He didn't bark no more. And then I had some people over doing work in my garage, and me and the dog were out training, and when I came in and the 2 guys were in my garage doing work, he growled at him. I corrected that. I can't remember if I corrected that with the leash or the e-collar. Not harsh, didn't have to be. He got the message. Hey, knock it off. I don't like that. Okay? He was never corrected for the reasons he came here. Didn't have to. And that's why, again, that statement is valid for most people in most areas, but not always. And I didn't want to diminish the people who do fix bad behaviors without using punishment, because there are people out there, okay? And I'm trying to think of another set. Okay, and I've done this at seminars. This is where people started questioning things. I called it positive confusion. I just needed people to understand what it was, and I won't go much longer here. Positive confusion, what does it mean to me? And I've used it excessively, very often, in public, at workshops, to show people how quick dogs can turn around without punishment, actually rewarding the things that you think need to be punished. Let me go a little deeper. The reason I'm bringing this up is, like I said, 40-something thousand people watched that live on DogSpot with me about resource guarding. And when I talked about this subject, there's no way I can get to all the emails, people asking about it. But I am getting ready to write an ebook that will be easily available and cheap for everyone online about resource guarding and the positive confusion. Let me go a little further here. I noticed years ago, when I started working with a lot more trouble dogs with the e-collar. Even back then, I wasn't punishing bad behaviors with the e-collar. I've always been a pretty light-handed trainer, but there was definitely more pressure, and the training wasn't as good back then when I started using e-collars. But the one thing I noticed, and I talked about a lot when I first started making videos, whenever we started training aggressive dogs, or especially fearful dogs, when we started conditioning to the e-collar, remember, conditioning them to the e-collar, not punishing the unwanted behaviors, I would see a tremendous change. And a lot of times the fear or the aggression would just disappear without ever addressing it. And I was doing it over and over and over again. I wasn't the only one. A lot of people were seeing the same thing. Anytime we started conditioning the dogs to the e-collar, the really fearful, insecure dogs became very confident. Couldn't understand why. And I used to talk about it back then, and I used to tell people, I don't understand why it happens, but it does. And I used to hypothesize, I guess that's a big word for me, that I think it's probably because it's the first time the dog ever gets a win. They've never had nothing to celebrate, all right? Now, the longer I did this, I started understanding it a little better. When we teach a dog something, when we start training, we want the training to be clear, of course. We want the communication to be as clear as possible. And unfortunately, most people don't communicate very clearly to their dog, right? And that creates a confusion where the dog can have a hard time learning if we're trying to teach a behavior. It could be difficult, especially if it's a difficult behavior. But when it comes to the mindset, let's use fear here. What I started seeing was the e-collar is a very strange sensation for a dog, completely foreign. It's not natural in their world. And when they first start feeling it, even at the lowest levels, barely perceivable, it always created some confusion. It creates confusion in every dog that first feels it that's never had it on before, for the most part, right? They feel something, even though they barely feel it, and the dog's looking around, has no idea what it is. May look behind them, may get an ear twitch, and the dog stops breathing, but the dog's confused. It has no idea what that is. But what I started seeing was, when these dogs became confused, paying attention to the strange sensation, the fear went away. The aggression went away. Whatever the problems were stopped for that small moment, because the dog really couldn't do both at once. It couldn't be scared of something and wonder what the hell it was feeling at the same time. It just didn't happen. And as we guided the dog through teaching it what that foreign feeling was, the dog's confidence just started going through the roof. We started using rewards later on down the road, right? Years later in training. And it just made the dog feel confident and strong, because we put the power of the dog to make its situation better on its own. Doesn't need us. In other words, what do I mean by that? When the e-collar would come on, the dog would be confused. We'd help the dog with the verbal command and maybe a little leash pressure. And when the dog responded, it would send the weird stimulation away and receive something good, a reward. And we use that to make the dog very strong and confident over and over. I'm not talking every now and then, 1 out of 10 dogs. I'm talking about every dog that struggled with situations like that. Every dog. Very common, right? So later down the road, when I started understanding that process more, I don't remember why I started doing it or how I started doing it, but I started with aggression cases and reactivity. I can't remember the first time it happened. I just don't. Maybe it came from the hands-off approach I started using with human aggressive dogs. I don't remember. But anyway, what I do is this. Let's go to one of the seminars I did last year. We had several extremely reactive dogs to other dogs. Very aggressive dogs, right? We did our training normally. We did all the same foundational stuff. But then I told people on the last day, this is where it's going to get a little confusing, guys, and we're going to break all the rules of everything you've learned. And I told them what we were going to do with the clicker. So maybe the day prior, we started teaching the dog what the clicker meant. Click, feed, click, feed, click, feed, right? So I told them, we bring this big, strong dog out. Big, strong German Shepherd, I think, was the first dog we did with. Very, very aggressive towards other dogs. Now, what happens is, when the dog would see a dog, it pays attention to everything, right? This is common. But then once that dog would come within a certain distance, once it would bust that threshold, this is all dogs for the most part, that's where the explosion comes, right? Once they feel too much pressure, and that dog or whatever that stimulus is that creates that, once it gets within certain range, that's what creates the blow up, okay? So what we started doing with that dog, as I've done many times before, is we'd put the dog in the middle of the floor, and we would take another dog, have someone come out, and we'd start approaching. And then the second that the subject dog, the dogs with the issues, would start getting stressed, you could see it building, we would click. And the second you would click, the dog would look at you and you'd reward. Because the dog is now programmed that every time it hears a click, food comes. And for that brief second, it's confused. I guess it's probably thinking, why did that click just happen, right? There's no rhyme or reason because we didn't ask the dog to do anything. So we waited till the dog was in a crummy mindset, a place we didn't want him, and we actually clicked and rewarded that mindset. I know, goes against everything we know, right? And people questioned it big time right there on the spot. Well, we continued to do that, and we continued to do that. And what happens almost always, guys, after a certain amount of repetitions, what the dog starts doing is now, when we approach and the dog feels the stress coming on, now it's starting to look to the owner before the marker even comes. It's getting patterned. And it's starting to teach itself to deal with the stress, because now the stress starts becoming something where something good follows. And we see big changes come very fast over and over. And people were really blown away. Like, that makes no sense. And so we go into a little further discussion. But then I started clicking kind of rapidly and had the owner rewarding. Clicking, rewarding, clicking, rewarding, clicking, rewarding. They had no idea why I was clicking. I said, let's wait till we're done. And so we did that because as they were looking at the dog wasn't entering a stressful situation anymore. He was accepting the other dog with no issues. And the clicks and rewards were coming kind of frequently, but they couldn't understand what I was clicking. And that's when I had to tell them, once the dog became more comfortable and when he started getting stressed out from the other dog, started looking on his own to the handler and we're marking and rewarding, now we switched it up. Now I started clicking behaviors from the other dog. I started clicking other things the dog was doing. Step forward, I'm clicking. Dog makes eye contact with the subject dog, I'm clicking. I'm doing all this clicking and rewarding from what the other dog is doing. And very quickly, now you got to remember, guys, a seminar isn't the best place to do this. It's not ideal. It's not ideal to fix problems, period. It just isn't. It's very difficult. You don't have a lot of time with each dog. And you're in an environment with all the dogs in one place. Because when I do a workshop, no matter what the issue is, I allow all the dogs to be in the room for the whole weekend. I want the dogs there. That's part of the training. So for a dog that's never been in that kind of situation, just being there and uncomfortable when we start out is tremendous training over 2 8-hour days, 2 9-hour days, 3 9-hour days, whatever it is. It's very beneficial, okay? So again, we started marking and rewarding the stress, the unwanted mindset, right? Because I could tell you this, guys, most of the dogs that we do this with, they've already been punished ad nauseum. They've received every kind of correction you could ever imagine. They have felt it all. Their neck is so desensitized to everything that you're never going to punish the mindset out of the dog. You're not going to do it. That stress and that mindset is going to be there until we change it. And almost always, in most cases, there's an exception to every rule, okay? And I'm not saying we never punish things. That's not what I'm saying. But for the most part, in situations like that, with these mindset behaviors, punishment rarely changes the mindset. It just doesn't happen. The reason I'm talking about this now, the reason I put out that statement is there's so much going on right now with the purely positive side coming after our tools and the way we train and everything. And you have to understand, guys, if you talk to 1,000 force-free trainers or pain-free trainers, whatever the people call themselves, a lot of them believe that everything is done with force and punishment on the balance side. Now, of course, there are so-called trainers that train like that. They're not trainers. You know what I call those people, right? But this is the belief system. What the purely positive side doesn't understand, and the pet smarts and the petcos, is that I think it's fair to say the majority of the so-called balance trainers, I prefer the word versatile trainer or just dog trainer, most trainers use a lot of positive reinforcement to teach things. Most. Even some of the most heavy-handed trainers. Come on, bug. Sorry. Bee buzzing in my ear. Even some of the most heavy-handed trainers that use a lot of punishment still teach things with positive reinforcement. That's what the purely positive side doesn't understand. But at the same side, there's a lot of people on the versatile side of dog training that think that you can only stop a behavior with punishment. It's not true. That statement isn't 100% true that I put outside. That's why I wanted to talk about that. But I did think the discussion was important. And like I said, it was shared over 150 times and over 1,000 people responding to it. There's a reason. So we need to talk about these things openly. And it's okay to disagree with people. But we're going backwards. We're not moving forward to trying to better the industry, and that's just how I feel. And I think we could talk about things till we're blue in the face, but you have to be able to show it. You have to be able to show it. And that's why I tried to put out a lot of videos with dogs with the e-collars and stuff and show what they look like, because they don't lie. They don't lie. But the side that's going after everything, they're always going to pull up videos of people that are misusing the tool, that aren't good trainers, that are abusive to the animals. We don't support that, right? Good trainers don't support that. We don't want to be associated with those people either. We just don't. Now, I can go on about this subject and give more specific examples for hours. I can't, and I won't do that to you guys. That's not fair, because if anyone makes it through the 33, 34, 35 minutes of this video, hats off to you, because I couldn't watch myself talk for that long. But I want people who maybe don't have so much experience to understand it's not that black and white. And that's why you have to educate yourself. I talked to a trainer the other day, guys, that was looking for some advice. Real nice girl. She's trying to make her way. And she was asking me about schools. And I gave her a few names. I asked her, if she's been following certain people. And she didn't know who they were. And I won't say their names. I'm done promoting people if they don't want to be promoted and all that stuff, But it really bothered me. And I got a little annoyed. And I said, you're a dog trainer and you don't know who these people are. These are some of the best trainers on the planet. I didn't tell her you need to follow me, follow my stuff. I gave her people's names that I think, you have a long way to go if you're not following some of the people I mentioned. These are some of the best in the industry that you need to know and you need to seek out and you need to learn from. It's really important. But what happens is a lot of these younger trainers think they're doing really well and they follow popular trainers. And as we all know, there's some absolutely awful, very popular, social media trainers out there that they can't train a dog whatsoever. The dogs that comply can get by. The dogs that don't comply are going to fry every time. That's what it is. And that's what a lot of these young trainers are learning. I see a lot of the e-collar work still. There's no excuse at this day and time to have a dog confused on the e-collar. And a lot of the ways people are teaching it, they're still providing a ton of unclear information to the dog and a ton of confusion. And this hurts us. It hurts the industry. It hurts the dogs. And you have to do better, and you have to learn from better people than you are, obviously. You just have to do it. You have to invest in your education. You have to, because the dogs deserve it, okay? So to make one thing very clear, not against punishment. I use it. Don't use it often because I don't have to. And the truth is, the better connection you have with the animal, the more compassion you have for the animal, the better you are at communicating with the animal, the less punishment you're going to have to use in training. And if you find yourself using punishment on every dog you work with, Lord have mercy, you probably need to find a different career. You really do, you know. And when I say punishment, the problem is a lot of people associate that with pain, right? Punishment can be the dog's trying to get by you in the door, and you use spatial pressure to back the dog back. You bump the dog with your leg, right? You give a little leash tension, a little leash pop. You do anything like that, you know. There's verbal corrections. There's using your body, you know. There's so many different things. But there's very few dogs that require the use of pain to stop an unwanted behavior. Very few dogs, you know. There are certain situations that are going to be different and require a stronger hand for the dog's safety and well-being. But if you prepare the dog properly and train the dog properly, that's never going to be an issue if you ever come to that. But if you're coming to that quite often and on a regular basis, I just, you know, and this is just all my opinion, guys, which doesn't mean jack shit. It just doesn't. But for all the people that send the emails, especially after that live on Dogspot, like I said, 40-something thousand people watched that live. That's crazy. So there's no way I can respond to all the emails, especially about the positive confusion and you know, marking and rewarding an unstable mindset. These are all things that go against everything most people have learned, right? But I never go just by a book or what someone tells me. You know, if I see the dog telling me something, I'm going to listen to the dog over anybody else, because usually the dog's correct and they're begging you to understand them. And if you just listen to the dog a little bit, you're going to learn a lot more than you would from a YouTube video. That's it. But you got to open your eyes. You got to put a little more care into the animal, and you have to learn to do things better. You just have to. You know, you should be able to do great things with a leash and a flat collar. If you can't, stay away from the tools. Get with someone that can educate you on how to train a dog with the leash and a flat collar. Because when you can do that, then when you add whichever tools you choose to use, nothing wrong with any of them, you're going to have a lot more success. But if you can't get to a good place with a leash and a flat collar, the tools are going to take you down a much darker place. And the dog's always going to pay the price, okay? So I don't want to go on any longer. I'm going to end this here. If you have questions, this will be on Facebook. I don't know if it's too long for Instagram. I'm not too good with Instagram, but I will put it on YouTube, okay? And then you can go on there. And I never ask people to do this, but I guess people are starting to say, hey, you should have more subscribers than you do. You got to have people like the video and share it and whatever people do, you know? And I think I'll start giving some people an incentive to do that, because people have to understand. We got to start doing better. All right, guys? You have any questions, put them here in the comments, and maybe we can go further down this hole. Sorry it's so long. Beautiful day. Your dog wakes up every day thinking it's going to be the greatest day of its life. Don't let them down. Don't take them for granted. They're not here very long, and it goes by fast. And then you get to the end, and it comes time to say goodbye, and you regret that you didn't appreciate them more, and cherish every moment that they're here. Peace.